Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Indian troops have martyred 4 more civilians, including a woman in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, raising the toll to 6 in the past 24 hours. The troops targeted the youths and the 45-year-old woman during a cordon and search operation in Srinagar's Batamalu area. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 410 days. Pakistan has reaffirmed its stand on Palestine's two-state solution in line with the UN resolutions. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Palestinians' right to self-determination is undeniable. He called for the renewal of a sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds Al-Sharif as its capital. Beijing has lodged a formal complaint with Washington over an upcoming visit of U.S. Under-Secretary for Economic Affairs Keith Krach to Taiwan. In a statement, China's foreign ministry said the U.S. official's visit encourages the arrogant attitude of Taiwan's separatist forces. Beijing deems Washington's recent advances towards Taiwan a violation of the One China policy that U.S. pledged to respect in 1979. India has recorded the world's biggest single-day COVID-19 spike of nearly 98,000 cases, taking the tally to over 5.1 billion. The United States has reported 1,147 deaths in a day, bringing the toll to more than 196,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the coronavirus has claimed 6,399 lives, with 6 new in the past 24 hours, while the total infections have crossed 303,000. The global death toll of the COVID-19 pandemic has topped 939,000, while the number of infections is nearing 30 million. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Indian troops have martyred 4 more civilians, including a woman in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, raising the toll to 6 in the past 24 hours. Over 300 innocent Kashmiris have been martyred by the Indian occupation forces in fake encounters. The troops targeted the youths and the 45-year-old woman during a cordon and search operation in Srinagar's Batamalu area. Earlier, Pakistan strongly condemned the extrajudicial killing of a Kashmiri shopkeeper from Sopore region of the occupied Kashmir. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the Indian forces picked up the 23-year-old Irfan Ahmed from his home and tortured him to death. It called on the world to take note of the worsening human rights situation in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 410 days. Now, Pakistan has reaffirmed its stand on Palestine's two-state solution in the line with the UN resolutions. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Palestinians' right to self-determination is undeniable. Qureshi called for the renewal of a sovereign Palestinian state with Al-Quds Al-Sharif as its capital based on internationally agreed parameters. Moving on, the UN Secretary-General has urged Palestine and Israel to start negotiations following normalization deals with Bahrain and the UAE. At a news conference, Antonio Guterres said the UN has been pushing hard to promote direct contact between Israel and Palestine. Guterres said international cooperation is an absolutely essential aspect to solve the problems. He said the Israeli annexation has been suspended and it is the moment the two sides find a political solution in line with the Security Council resolutions. Earlier, Israeli occupation forces detained 13 Palestinians during wide-scale raids and search operations in several areas in the occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, dozens of Jewish settlers have desecrated the Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem. Palestine's Islamic Awqaf Department says at least 126 settlers escorted by Israeli police forced their way into the mosque. Now, an Israeli rights group says nearly 3,500 Palestinians have been killed during Benjamin Netanyahu's era as prime minister. According to their report, 799 children and 342 women were among the Palestinians who lost their lives in Israeli attacks. It said thousands of others were wounded in the attacks by Israeli forces. It said 167 Palestinians were killed in 2012, while more than 2,000 were killed 2 years later in an operation dubbed Protective Edge. The year 2014 was one of the bloodiest years in Palestinian history due to the attacks Israel launched on Gaza. Moving on now, the Taliban say Germany has assured its support and assistance for people's peace in Afghanistan. In a tweet, spokesperson Dr. Mohammed Naeem said a Taliban delegation headed by Mullah Abdul Haq Havasik met with German envoy Marcus Potzel in Doha. Naeem said both sides discussed the ongoing Afghan peace process. Earlier, Taliban's political affairs director Mullah Baradar Ahund had a virtual meeting with Norway's Foreign Minister Anne-Marie Arkson. The Taliban spokesperson said Arkson and Baradar discussed the importance of the intra-Afghan talks and humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. Now, Beijing has launched a formal complaint with Washington over an upcoming visit of U.S. Under-Secretary for Economic Affairs Keith Crack to Taiwan. In a statement, China's foreign ministry said the U.S. official's visit encourages the arrogant attitude of Taiwan's separatist forces. Earlier, Washington then earmarked Crack to attend the funeral of former Taiwanese President Lee Teng-hui, known as the island's father of democracy. The U.S. remains Taiwan's main arms supplier, even though the two do not have any diplomatic ties. Beijing deems Washington's recent advances towards Taiwan a violation of the One China policy that the United States pledged to respect in 1979. The U.S. says it is planning to expand its Navy to confront the growing maritime challenges from China. In a speech, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said the game-changing Future Forward program will expand the fleet to over 355 ships. Esper said the plan will add tens of billions of dollars to the U.S. Navy budget by 2045 to maintain superiority over Chinese forces. It said the future fleet will have increased lethality, survivability, capability and capacity to conduct distributed warfare. The Defense Secretary said Indo-Pacific region is the priority theater for the United States military. Esper said China has built a larger fleet, but it still cannot match the power of the U.S. Navy. Earlier, a Pentagon report claimed the Chinese Navy is the largest in the world with 350 ships, while the United States has 293. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has slammed Oracle's bid for partnering with ByteDance video sharing app Tik-Tok over security concerns. His comments come after the Committee on Foreign Investment said the deal does not resolve national security concerns. At a press conference in Washington, Donald Trump said he was not informed of the committee's conclusion. At the White House press briefing, spokesperson Kayleigh McEnany said the administration will decide on the Oracle Tik-Tok partnership soon.
Yeah, so you'll have a decision here in short order. I'm not going to get too far into it because I don't want to get ahead of the president, but obviously we care deeply about protecting the data and security of American citizens.
Now, Iran has told the International Court of Justice the United States sanctions violate the decades-old bilateral Treaty of Amity. During a virtual hearing, Tehran's representative urged the UN top court to dismiss a U.S. argument that it has no jurisdiction in the case. The lawyer said U.S. curbs are destroying the Iranian economy and ruining millions of lives. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. will return to the UN to reimpose sanctions on Iran next week. In a news conference, he said Washington will do all it needs to do to make sure those sanctions are enforced. Washington has also vowed to impose sanctions on any international arms manufacturers who deal with Iran. Libya's Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj has announced to step down by end of October. In a televised speech, Sarraj said the dialogue committee will complete its work and choose a new presidential council and Prime Minister. Citing the UN-sponsored talks in Geneva, Siraj said the progress made to unify Libya and prepare for elections is encouraging. Meanwhile, the Turkish foreign minister says Ankara and Moscow have moved closer to an agreement on a ceasefire and political process in Libya. Turkey backs Libya's internationally recognized government of national accord, while Russia supports the eastern-based Libyan National Army of Khalifa Haftar. Earlier this month, Libya's rival factions also agreed to hold elections within 18 months to appoint a new government. Now, Cyprus says it is ready to engage in talks with Turkey to resolve differences, but only without blackmail and threats. President Nicholas Anastasiades made these remarks after talks with European Council President Charles Michel in Nicosia. He said Turkey's move to extend drilling operations came at a time when the EU was taking initiatives to reduce tensions. Meanwhile, Turkey's Deputy Foreign Minister says the operations in the Mediterranean are in response to unilateral actions by Greek Cypriots and Greece. The official said this is not intimidation, but to show Turkey will continue to defend its own rights. On Tuesday, Turkey said it had extended a drilling vessel's operation in the disputed waters of Cyprus until 12th of October. Meanwhile, Turkey's police forces have arrested 16 suspects allegedly linked to the ISIS in the capital city, Ankara. State news agencies said anti-terror police with the National Intelligence Service arrested 16 out of 19 wanted Iraqi nationals. It says the police are still searching for the remaining suspects. ISIS has carried out at least 10 suicide bombings, 7 bomb attacks and 4 armed attacks, killing 315 people and injuring hundreds more in Turkey. In response, Turkey launched anti-terror operations at home and abroad to prevent further attacks. Now, India has recorded the world's largest single-day COVID-19 spike of nearly 98,000 cases, taking the tally to over 5.1 million. The United States has reported 1,147 deaths in a day, bringing the toll to more than 196,000. The global death toll of the COVID-19 pandemic has topped 939,000, while the number of infections is nearing 30 million. More details in this report.
As the world desperately pushes for an early release of a COVID-19 vaccine, the virus continues to rip through populations in India, parts of Latin America and the US, with over 1,000 dying in each country every day. Head of US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Robert Redfield, says a safe vaccine was unlikely before mid of next year. But US President Donald Trump contradicted him, saying a vaccine can be announced as soon as October.
Manufactured all of the necessary supplies so that as soon as the FDA approves the vaccine, and as you know, we're very close to that, we'll be able to distribute at least 100 million vaccine doses by the end of 2020, and a large number much sooner than that.
Africa's hotspot, South Africa's new estimate has found that instead of 600,000, about 12 million people in the country are probably infected. Ukraine and Indonesia are also reporting rising number of infections in their countries. World Health Organization says the disease is making an alarming comeback.
What is really worrying, I think, for us is that we're not only seeing an increase in the case numbers, but we're seeing an increase in the hospitalizations, we're seeing increases in ICU, and this is a number of countries that we're seeing this in across the Northern Hemisphere, particularly in certain parts of Europe, in Spain and in France, in the eastern part of Europe, in Georgia, Montenegro, Ukraine, in some states in the United States.
Mainland China has reported 9 new COVID-19 infections, down from 12 recorded yesterday. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported an uptick in daily infections due to sporadic clusters outbreak and untraceable cases, as 153 tested positive overnight.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 6 more people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has reached 6,399. The ministry said 545 people tested positive for the virus overnight. It said there are 6,066 active infections, while the total confirmed cases have crossed 303,000 mark. The ministry said over 291,000 people have recovered so far. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has accused the European Union of not negotiating a post-Brexit deal in good faith. Johnson's government has reached a deal to avert a rebellion in its own party over internal market bill, which the EU has asked the UK to scrap. The bill is aimed at ensuring Britain's four constituent nations can trade freely with each other after fully leaving the European Union. The Prime Minister said the bill was essential to counter absurd threats from Brussels, including a food blockade. Johnson said the European Union wants London to put up trade barriers between Britain and its province of Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab has accused the EU of threatening the Good Friday Agreement by politicising the Brexit talks. Now, Belarus has charged opposition protest leader Maria Kolesnikova with incitement to undermine national security. In a statement, the investigative committee said Kolesnikova provoked people through social media posts. In a statement, Kolesnikova said she will be taken out alive or in bits if she does not voluntarily leave Belarus. Kolesnikova is currently in jail in Minsk after ripping up her own passport last week to thwart an attempt to expel her to Ukraine. Kolesnikova played an important role in weeks of mass demonstrations by protesters who accused President Alexander Lukashenko of rigging his re-election. Lukashenko has denied all allegations against him. Now, 2 people have been killed while 2 others wounded in a mass shooting incident in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Philadelphia police said 3 gunmen opened fire at a basketball court in Roberto Clemente Park near the Clement Recreation Center. Police said both wounded men were hospitalized, with one side to be in critical condition. A deputy police chief said the shooters shot one of the victims multiple times after chasing them in the basketball court. Officials said the assailants fired 55 shots while there were over 30 people on the court and in the adjacent park.
I'm nervous, of course, because I was in my patient house and I heard all these loud shots, real fast. And suddenly I heard the choppers and stuff, and it's my time to go home. It's at 9 o'clock, so I'm walking, and I heard somebody saying somebody got killed. It's horrible.
Well, authorities say they have apprehended a suspect who was trying to flee the scene with a gun, while 2 of his accomplices remain at large. Now, a U.S. congressional probe has found 2 fatal crashes of Boeing 737 MAX were due to the plane maker's unwillingness to share technical details. In its report, the House Transportation Committee said there is a culture of concealment at Boeing, but the regulatory system is also flawed. The report found failures in the plane's design as well as an overly close relationship between Boeing and the Federal Aviation Authority. It said this compromised the process of gaining safety certification. Responding, Boeing said it has incorporated feedback from multiple investigations and reviews into its redesign of the aircraft. It said the company has learned many hard lessons from the accident. The Boeing 737 MAX has been grounded since March 2019 after 2 crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia, killing 346 people. Now, the U.S. National Hurricane Center says Hurricane Sally has brought historic and catastrophic flooding to the Alabama-Florida coast. The NHC says some parts of the Gulf Coast have been inundated with more than 18 inches of rain over the last 24 hours. In Elba, Alabama, the Pea River threatened to overflow its banks and local officials have called for evacuation. Sally has downgraded to a tropical storm as maximum sustained winds drop to 70 miles per hour. The storm has uprooted trees, flooded streets and cut power to over 500,000 of homes. In a tweet, Alabama Governor Ivey said the residents not go outside and to stay away from the power lines. A storm tracking company said the damage from Sally is expected to reach $3 billion, shutting over a quarter of the offshore oil and gas production. Pakistan takes big tread forward in the climate change era by achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal a decade ahead of the 2030 deadline. In its annual report, the United Nations Development Programme has lauded Pakistan's achievement. More in this report by our correspondent, Sumaira Khan.
Despite being listed amongst the vulnerable nations to global warming, Pakistan finally turned its green ambitions into a reality and earned global recognition. The country met the UN goal for protecting the environment and holding off climate change well before the deadline. Climate Change Minister Malik Amin Aslam detailed some pivotal measures taken by Pakistan in this regard.
On the forestry side, we had the Billion Tree project, which was started in 2014 in the KP province, and then we achieved that target in 2018. And then we initiated another program called the 10 Billion Tree project, which is all over Pakistan, and it is underway right now. On the energy side, we've done a number of things since we came in. Firstly, we introduced Pakistan's first electric vehicle policy. We also announced the fuel shift from Euro 2 to Euro 5. Similarly, on clean energy, we have a target of meeting, by 2025, 60% of our production should be clean energy, which includes big dams and hydro, wind, and solar.
The Prime Minister's advisor Malik Amin Aslam said Pakistan has also begun converting the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor into the China-Pakistan Green Economic Corridor to boost climate change controlling measures.
We have also started making the CPEC into a green CPEC, and in that context, we shelved 2,600 megawatts of imported coal projects that were signed and included in the CPEC. We have stopped that. And we have shifted to 3,700 megawatts of hydro projects, which have been inaugurated by the Prime Minister.
The UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Goal calls for an urgent action to improve health and education while tackling climate change and preserving the environment. According to the experts, Pakistan has faced around 150 freak weather incidents as a result of climate change in past 20 years. But the efforts to mitigate these hitches have started yielding results in the shortest span of time as of 5 years, which is being lauded globally. Reporting for Indus News, Sumaira Khan, Islamabad.
Now, whether you are the world's shortest bus driver, own the largest gum wrapper chain, or can perform a headstand on a speeding motorbike, anyone can be a record breaker if they put their mind to it, and so says this year's Guinness World Record holders. More about the amazing new records in this report.
Guinness that adjudicates on record-breaking achievements reveals some of its stars of the new Guinness World Records 2021 book. Frank Fike Hashem from Hampshire, southern England, stands at 136.2 centimeters tall, making him the world's shortest bus driver. A stunt rider, Marco George, also from Hampshire, topped 122.59 kilometers per hour on his bike while performing a headstand on the seat. 11-year-old Nigerian Eke Chineso scored 111 touches with one football while balancing another on his head. He is now the title holder of the most consecutive football touches in 1 minute while balancing a football on the head. Rats Freddy and Frankie, aka the boys, have some tricks up their furry paws, breaking 2 rat-related world records in the UK. They hold the most alternating paw tricks by a rat in 30 seconds and the most jumps through a hoop by a rat in 30 seconds of 8 leaps. India's Zorawar Singh, a multiple Guinness World Records title holder, has scooped the record for the most skips on roller skates in 30 seconds of 135 skips. Canadian-born Gary Dushel started building his chain out of gum wrappers on March 11, 1965, while at high school. 42,000 hours later, Dushel is the proud owner of 32,556 meters, the longest gum wrapper chain in the world. Canada's Sarah Louis-Jean used bolas to floor tap her way into the iconic record book, tallying 385 taps in 1 minute. The new Guinness World Records 2021 book has 12 chapters of record-breaking feats from around the globe.
Now, designers Mark Badgley and James Mishka have used their desire for travel as inspiration for their new Spring 2021 collection. They debuted their fashion show via video on the New York Fashion Week digital platform. More in this report.
As travel restrictions were imposed due to the coronavirus pandemic, many activities were put to halt around the world. Fashion designers Mark Badgley and James Mishka always wanted to travel to get inspiration for their collections, but they were able to put on their debut for the Spring 2021 collection with their imagination at the New York Fashion Week. The duo filmed a small portion of the completed line at a public garden in Westbury, New York, and said it was a miracle that took place.
It was a crazy season. There were so many starts and stops, and
factories are closed, factories are open,
fabric mills fact, I mean, layoffs, comeback, stop, start. It was just, you know, it's a miracle that it came together.
The designers describe the collection as luxe loungewear with many interchangeable pieces, including a sequin pantsuit and chiffon palazzo pants. The collection also included classic evening wear, predicting there will be many celebrations when COVID-19 restrictions lift. The pair, who have been hosting shows for 33 years straight, said the excitement of a show can never be replaced.
You can never replace the excitement, I think, of just a old school fashion show. When those lights go down and that girl struts, her stuff, first look, it's just, you get goosebumps,
Designer Jason Wu also showed his collection with a limited socially distanced audience, while Tadashi Shoji debuted his collection via a video presentation. New York Fashion Week will end today with Christian Siriano showing his new line from his Connecticut home.
Now in business stories, the United States Federal Reserve has vowed to keep interest rates pinned near zero until a rise in inflation. In a news conference, Federal Reserve Chair Jeremy Powell said it will maintain the rates until the economy exceeds the 2% inflation target. Powell said the pledge will support the economic activity and return the inflation to its targeted goal faster. He said the bank provided stability and relief in the first phase of the pandemic crisis, and now it was ready to support the expansion. Powell said the fiscal recovery is ongoing, but the pace is expected to slow, requiring continuous support from central bank and further government spending.
The path forward will also depend on the policy actions taken across all parts of the government to provide relief and to support the recovery for as long as needed. The Federal Reserve's response to this crisis has been guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people, along with our responsibilities to promote the stability of the financial system. We remain committed to using our full range of tools to support the economy in this challenging time.
Well, newly released projections show most policymakers see interest rates on hold through at least 2023, with inflation never breaching 2% over that period. Now, New Zealand is facing the worst recession in decades following strict measures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The country's GDP shrank by 12.2% between April and June due to the lockdown and border closures. Finance Minister Grant Robertson said the GDP numbers were better than expected and suggested a strong recovery ahead. It is New Zealand's first recession since the global financial crisis and its worst since 1987, when the current GDP framework began. Economy is likely to be a key issue in next month's election, which was delayed after an unexpected spike in COVID-19 cases in August. The government hopes its pandemic response will lead to a quick recovery. And now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.